Two, one. Mr. Eddie Pesos, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to chatting with you. And yeah,
You know what's funny? We've we technically kind of know the same people. So I know Nika. Who else do I know? I know LJ, who you've worked with. Um, I know K Riz through an old band that I was in. And I believe we opened for him. So, and then I heard that you were in the Honor Roll collective, which to me was, a lot of things being connected, but I never met you. So I was always interested, in the one day that we would finally meet each other. And here we are on the podcast.
yeah, man. No, all of that sounds about right. Like honestly, from Nika, I first heard of you from Nika, and then I remember that show, the K Riz show. And I know the band you used to play with, and like I was really impressed because like it's really hard to, because aside from rapping, I play instruments myself, and I really admire someone who plays keys and sings along the way, because my instrument was bass, and half the time, even though I really try to like rap while play bass, like the dynamic sometimes is very hard for your like left arm, and then suddenly your mouth up. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
The big secret, like during that whole show, was that I never saw myself as a piano player. I actually play guitar. So guitar is like my main instrument. And then when I guess Shanice, I don't know if she still goes by the other name, but Shanice asked me to play keys, I was like, oh man, I don't know how to play really well. But she needs a key player. So I was like, okay, I'll step up to the plate and make it happen. Yeah, that's crazy. We knew kind of the same people and we hung around but we never exactly met or exchanged information or even just like had a conversation until now. So aside to listening to your most recent work, which I thought was really, really nice, I would like to get to know about you. Where do you come from? What the music, all of that, like the inspiration to go into music. How did it all start? How did it all begin?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in the Philippines, Baguio City. It's in the northern Philippines. It's a very small city. I moved to Canada in 2014 on my own. I was a temporary foreign worker. And I got I really took a focus on making music in Canada per se, around 2017. But the interest started 2000, like while I was on that working process. But the focus, I'd like to say, came around 2017, 2018 when I got my Canadian residency. So I had like more freedom. Like I had more flexibility to do what I want. Like basically, I had to work off a big chip off my shoulder before I had that allowance to be me and start off a life besides a life, like my passion, like kick off my passion in my 20s. But music, it's always been a part of me.
Was it like that back in the Philippines too?
Yeah, back in the Philippines, my grandfather was he's a keyboard player, and that's how I think my love for music filled in. But I've always had a love for hip hop, but I never really had the courage to like really rap, or be a front man per se. What I did was I played bass for a couple bands in high school, and then my bass teacher, I really admire him because he was very, one of my bass teachers, he was very open to different kinds of music. Like he would break down for me, oh, do you know this bass line the Black Eyed Peas used in this song? Or do you know this bass line that Kanye West, you see the transition, he did that, and then there's synth bass. So it was a lot of different genres, not just focused primarily on like hard rock and funk. And then I really admired the hip hop aspect of things. And then later on, he just like was like for kicks saying that let's build a hip hop band. Like Wu-Tang did it. Who else? Lauryn Hill does it. And this was when I was 17.
The Roots.
Yeah, the Roots, Questlove. When I was 17. And then he said, and I said, okay, I'll play bass. He said, no, man, I want you to rap with me, because back when he was teaching me, sometimes we'd play an album and then we'd rap along to it instead of play. And I was like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. And then later on became Skydive Academy. So I think rapping really came to me 17, 18, but the actual practice of just being me without anyone else around me came 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Yeah.
Okay, and how old are you now?
I'm 29 now.
Oh, 29. Okay, so that's quite a journey. So you moved here 2017, if I got that right?
2014.
2014. 2017 was when you started your rap career. Sorry. So 2014, 6 years. That's quite a long time. But you also, to me, it sounds like you really grew up in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And I have questions for that because I didn't. I actually grew up in Canada for the most part. I moved out of the Philippines in 1996. I came from Manila. My father's mother, and my father actually came from Alaminos, which is I think it's about, I don't know how many kilometers, but it's fairly close to Baguio.
Mm-hmm.
But growing up in the Philippines in the music scene, and coming here and experiencing the North American music scene, which you're learning is different from American and different from Canadian music scene, how can you compare and how can you contrast?
Like nowadays, I still try to immerse myself. Like actually, before I was chatting with you, part of my morning was even looking into who's big in hip hop now in the Philippines. And it's crazy. When I was in the Philippines, hip hop is already hip hop per se or music per se. There's sold out concerts. There's like stages which is like filled with festival esque vibes, but it wasn't really documented as much by like the likes of CNN back when I was growing up. But the energy has always been there. I think that energy doubled more in the last, I'd like to say 5-6 years or so, or just the last decade. It's been there are more people there who are like, you could really see that there's more currency being given into the music scene there. Like
Okay.
artists, there's an example of this one artist who I know is from La Union in the Philippines, very close to Baguio, that he started out from just being a basement rapper, and now he actually he was able to build a nice life for him just because of for music. Like he released an album, and it's from what I see, at least I don't really know the guy, but you can tell that there's more relevance in music there nowadays. In all genres, because back then when I was growing up, the biggest thing there before was the rock scene. Like there was a lot of currency there. There's battle of the bands where people could win a recording contract plus +1 million pesos. Like that was back in the early 2000s.
That's huge money out there too.
Yeah.
That's like about $25,000 Canadian, I think, something like that, which is a lot of money in the Philippines. That's enough to live for a while.
Plus endorsements, like they get endorsed by that beer company who puts up the battle. So it's like back when I was growing up, I think that was the biggest part of it. In the hip hop side of things, it was like the Francis Magalonas, the Apple Diaps. But now I think it's wider than that. Like a lot of the Filipino listeners appreciate their local talent more. I find that a lot of them, especially, there's a lot of success with artists there because they have a good, solid following within the country,
Yeah, I hear the same thing about people from Europe, where people from Europe, and it's not to put Americans down. I mean, but from my experience or from what I hear, if you're a fan of, if you're from Europe and you like someone, like you like someone's music, it's not because it was a trend. It was because you actually like their music. Like you discovered them and you like them. And I think that I don't know if it's Canada or if it's North America, but I find that music is very trendy now. You know what I mean? So it's like you listen to something on TikTok and it's like some kind of weird sounding thing and it's catchy, but it's weird. But then you'll see someone who's, 15, 16 years old. It's like their jam. Do you think that that's kind of the future for music here in North America, where it's literally driven by trends? Or do you think that the music that artists like us put out still stands a chance?
That's a really good question, actually. Like I've been trying to conceptualize that in the last couple of months, because I know per se that going both ways have success with it. Like I've been watching a lot of Gary Vaynerchuk. I haven't been lately, but in the year,
Gary V.
Gary Vee has always been talking about it. Like last year before the pandemic, I know he had interviews with like the likes of the Baby and the likes of Megan Thee Stallion, those big upcoming artists. And actually any person, any creator he was talking to, he always pitched out TikTok. I don't know if he always had a secret partnership with them or something like that, but he always kept saying, go on TikTok, not Triller, because on TikTok you can have an 11-year-old listen to your stuff. And he was big into pushing that. So I think in a way music is a trend, like, because nowadays, especially with regard to music and fashion, like it's always been hand in hand, like from back when Michael Jackson, the Madonnas and all that, it's always been music and the latest trends have always gone hand in hand. But I think there's also a good balance of it nowadays, that you don't have to be in the trend to be successful, because of certain creators who are really pushing for the underground, like Selection Radio per se. I really like that nowadays people like relating it to the recent passing of MF Doom, who was a very underground player in the game, but still very well respected in all areas of music. I like to say, but even there's a bunch of teenagers nowadays, or even kids who are 13, 14, who know about him just because of the power of the internet and because of the influence. I think the internet is a very, when used right, good pathway for influence. So I think there's a balanced route between the TikTok route and the influential route, if that makes sense.
I think so too. I remember somewhere, I think in one of my episodes with Adam Ivy, he says that you can have a really good week, you know, where you have like 100,000 streams, but it means nothing if you don't have a brand to fall into. You know, if the infrastructure of your brand isn't set up, you know, like you don't have all this other selection of music, if you don't have a personality, if you don't have like something that, you know, people can consume about you, then it's really hard for people to stay invested in you, and you'll be like one of those one-hit wonders. And so yes, I think you're right in that you need a balance. I think that it's nice to have a little push, like, you know, a gateway for that hype. But I think that, like, even if it takes someone like 10 years to build their following, you know, like from 0 to like even 10,000 fans, and it took you 10 years, which is, I mean, that's some hard work. I think that that's still more valuable than like year number 1, you have like 1 million people following your stuff, and then you get overwhelmed, and then you get Justin Bieber, and then you write a song about being lonely. I think that both are successful. The latter being a little more traumatic, in my opinion. But what's your thoughts on like on fame? Do you think that fame is like fabricated? Do you think that fame is like it's a product of your success, or do you think it's all kind of fake? Do you think it's all like in the forefront? What do you think about fame?
That's a great question again, man. Like honestly, with fame, I somewhat talked about it in a song on my project. Everybody wants to be a star, right? Like everybody wants to be a star until you're actually there and you feel the pressure. Because if you look at it not just in quote unquote a metaphor of a star, like scientifically a star is a body of gas, that's why it's burning, because it's covered into the gas consumed, like, you know, it's covered in flames. But until a certain point in time, that star dies and it's just a dead planet type thing. So it's like, how long do you think you, not a rock, scientifically, biologically a rock, but a human living biological being, really contain all the pressure, not just an actual flame, but the pressure of peer pressure, the pressure of, say, what got you that fame in the first place, be it a one-hit wonder or a full album, full 12 songs that everything was a hit, or be it having to burn bridges that you didn't want to burn in the process, you know? I think it's fame is pressure. I think fame is exciting. And I think fame is something that could be used as a drive when looked at in a more disciplined perspective, because I find all human beings are, because what's the next best thing to currency for human beings, I find, is pride. And pride is something which is an instigator to someone's ego. And fame is the biggest, I think, ego rub someone can get, because you feel valued by everyone and anyone that doesn't even really know you, that just knows your music, but just knows the surface level, so to speak. So I think fame is a good boost when you look at it in a disciplined way, but I don't think fame is the end goal of anything and everything, because fame is like money, guys. In the end, there's always
Yeah.
a means to an end, and I think fame is what drives people to look at their past more in order to
Mm.
future instead of being present. I think when you're present, you're more aware of what's around you than really looking back and looking forward too much.
I agree. I think that I love what you said about the star analogy. I think that the brightest of stars or celebrities, to use that analogy, the brightest of stars shine the most passionately in the moment, right? And going to your the scientific thing about stars in astronomy, you know, stars are really, really far away, right? So when you look at the night sky, you're literally looking at a star that could be dead. But it shines so brightly that even though it's from the past, you could still see how bright it shines, and only the brightest of stars make it to your eyes, right? That's the way that I see, like, you know, the most legendary celebrities or the most legendary musicians like Prince and like Elvis and like the Beatles, is that, you know, they're like really, really bright stars that even though they passed away, you know, they shine so brightly that even though their history is so far away, it still reaches your eyes like a star that's, you know, that's very bright. Um, and going to what you said about, you know, with fame, I really do feel that, like, you know, it's a responsibility. I think that if you have fame, you know, you have to learn how to rule that fame. You can't let it rule you. I
Yep.
think that that's like, I always tell myself this, that, like, you know, any one of us in Calgary, any musician can suddenly, you know, by some grace, boom, you've got your big song. Now everyone's coming to you. You know, what do you do next, right? And the first thing that I think what I would do is definitely be responsible more than anything else, because now all the eyeballs are pointing at you, and now you're like, oh gosh, what do you do? But you must imagine that, like, you know, Daniel Caesar, Frank Ocean, who else? Kendrick Lamar, Drake, even, like the amount of responsibility that they have to face, and they're not allowed to show you that. They gotta look the part, right? But there's a lot of responsibility, I think, in being famous, because you're so influential. People will follow you. People will look to you for, you know, any kind of way to live life. Literally, like how to live life. I think that really influential people, especially celebrities and especially musicians with powerful messages, they influence people's lives like through and through. I mean, gangster rap. Like think about what happened in the '90s, right?
Yeah.
Sudden surge in crime in the LA general area or greater area. But yeah, like that's crazy. Uh, going to the next thing that interested me. So I've always known you as Lyric,
Mhm.
and I was like, oh yeah, Lyric. I wonder how he's doing. And I was just looking around. I'm like, I can't find him. What happened? Did he delete his account? Like, oh gosh, I hope not. And I see Eddie Pesos, and I was like, huh? So you have to tell me what happened.
In all honesty, it's like I'm still trying to process it, and I'm still trying to really approach it in what is going to be a smarter choice. I think in anything we do, like I said, responsibility and making choices that would either benefit you or something you just have to commit to. Lyric started when, like, as I said, Lyric was I never really wanted to rap. Like it wasn't really like, I've always enjoyed listening to rap and rapping along the songs, but I've never really envisioned myself even being a rapper on stage. In all honesty, it just came about when on a lot of my tough times as a temporary foreign worker, I just suddenly started listening to beats or even writing to instrumentals of hip hop songs, and just it came as a form of like an outlet or a therapy to get by
Mm.
time where I didn't really know anyone. Because honestly, in the first 2 years that I was here, I didn't have any friends. Like I was, and that's by choice, because I just wanted to keep to myself. There was a lot of things that shook my trust when I came here, so that's why I
Mm.
just chose to isolate. That's why, in all honesty, and this may like, in all honesty, this isolation doesn't feel new to me. Like all of this lockdown with COVID, it doesn't feel new to me. It kind of is like some gives me some sort of comfort to some extent. Um, but yeah, Lyric, I think is long story short, Lyric is a bit. It's always going to be a part of me. It's always what gave me the drive to rap and to want to develop and be better at rapping. But I think it's I want to level up. Like I want to really find a sound where I think with Pimp that latest project, I found a pocket where I'm comfortable with, and now it's time to develop that pocket a bit more. But I just wanted to also see with a new name, because I've been playing around with a name. I've always been terrible at thinking of names. Even Lyric just came about so spontaneously. But I've been lately I've been like playing around for almost 2-3 years now. 2 years now actually, thinking of the name Eddie Pesos. I've been thinking of it for a while, and then I just after that last project, I just wanted to commit to it to be like, okay, moving forward, I want to develop my sound, still have tangents of Lyric, but somewhat of a more refined artist in Eddie Pesos. And plus, I want to be more closer to my name. Like my name's Edward Q, and Eddie. Friends call me that in a nickname. And Pesos is just like, that's why I also put like the dollar signs there, because it somewhat still references my story. Like I used to earn pesos, and then I bettered my life, and now I'm having my currencies chasing dollars.
Yeah,
and
dollars.
Reference it in Filipinos. Like a lot of people, when you say pesos, they think Mexico right away.
Yeah.
But they don't even realize that's the currency of the Philippines until you. I think a handful, maybe people know, but the most people I've talked to don't even in the Philippines. But
I think Spanish-speaking countries, a good amount of them also have pesos. But what's interesting is that when people look at you, they'll know, okay, it's Filipino. Like I think that people should be able to, in my mind, put 2 and 2 together. So
yeah,
that's cool. I like when you said level up. As you may or may not know, but that's like the huge theme that I always aspire to. Because just like you, I started probably 2018, 2019 when I started my Zacarias project. Before that, I was doing a lot of things. I was a producer for several years from 2015 all the way. I mean, I still produce now, where I used to work as an intern at the beach, which was at one point, I think it was at one point the best studio in Calgary. Now it's OCL, but it was really one of the top at one point.
yes,
And I was there interning and working with a lot of artists and all this and that. And I always get asked, like you got asked by your mentor to step in front. Someone said, you should go up and sing and and just be at the forefront for a bit. But I always was afraid of the idea. But unlike you, it took me a while to really approach that. And so leveling up is a very important theme for me too. So me hearing it from you makes me very happy. Speaking of leveling up, I'm curious what you mean by that. Like, do you mean musically? Do you also mean like you have other ventures that you're gonna explore and get into? I'm curious.
Yeah, honestly, both musically and personally, I think I've been really contemplating on artist development, character development should always come before artist development, because the artist is just a part of you, and I think if you develop yourself more, that aspect just follows along. But to really break it down, I really want to, because a lot of the production I've had in my past songs were producers who are not even from Calgary. Most of the time from Toronto, if not from the US, who I just find off, like say BeatStars, but I connect with them, I message them, and I show them my previous work. And then I try to connect and establish a relationship where it's like, oh, this is what I was able to make through your song. Like they're aware of the music I write to their songs, but I want to have it more homegrown. Like,
nice.
For a point in time, I doubted a lot of the production in Calgary, but the thing is, like, it's not the production. I think it's me. That's why I think Eddie Pesos needs to be more flexible than Lyric ever was.
Okay.
And I wanna work more with local producers in turn, and I want to have more of a discipline where it's like, I think with Lyric, it was as if I never really got that phase where, unlike most rappers' stories, where they were in high school and they met someone off their high school who makes beats. Like I never had that. I think Lyric was my high school phase in my 20s. Eddie Pesos to be the more say professional version of Lyric, more like not saying Lyric is not professional, but being more professional as a musician, where it's like when I approach a friend, like say, and great that you mentioned production, because I was aware of all of Lyric before, like when I approach say, a friend for production, I'm like, hey, what instrumentation do you have? I also want to talk business in turn on how do we both eat? Because
Mm-hmm.
I that professionalism has to, if not already has started with some great musicians in the city, has
Yeah.
also has to continue. The trend has to continue where it's not just like, oh, hook me up with a beat, then we'll figure it out after. I think it
Mm-hmm.
has from a professional level. It's like, okay, let's figure it out. Monetarily, this is what I can afford, but let's figure out how we can both grow off this in a more balanced way and also
Mm-hmm.
growing it. I want Eddie Pesos to have more knowledge on publishing and on
Mm-hmm.
thinking music, where it's like to have more, to expound it more, not just for music that I create for myself, but also I
Mm-hmm.
want, I don't know if LJ's mentioned, but I really, I love writing and I love coming up with
Mm-hmm.
melodies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the best singer. I can hold a note or two every now and then, but I get too pitchy. But I always enjoy hearing whatever I have in my head be expounded greater by someone who can actually sing.
I see.
So I want Eddie Pesos to have that venture of like being a
Mm-hmm.
writer, not just for himself, for someone else, and to have more of like a professional approach to music per se.
Mm-hmm.
I think with the last album, I really was happy with how everything came out sonically, but I want to approach it more. I want to grow it more, and I want it to
Mm-hmm.
really flourish, not just for myself, but for everyone else. You know, especially in the Filipino community here. And yeah,
Mm-hmm. And do you envision music as really a reflection of your life? You know, like of what if not a part of your story, it's how you think and how you feel about the world, correct?
yeah,
That's really interesting that you mentioned collaborations. The one thing when I started approaching Zacharias, I already knew that like, well, I could make my own music, and I don't have to
Mhm.
rely on other producers and working with other people. I thought
Yeah,
about that way for a while, and I did an EP that way, which I thought was pretty good. Um, but I find that collaboration and working with other musicians who are creative and productive as well really expand your sonic paradigm. You know, like what you could think could be possible only because you've never thought of it and they thought of it, right?
yeah,
Um, and I do find that like the hip hop way, this is what I was thinking about. The hip hop industry of music industry of like, I'm a producer, a beat maker. Here's my catalog of beats. Rappers come along and
yeah,
grab your favorite sounds that inspire you. Is a nice way of doing it. I think that it'll always grant success because
yeah,
you really it's like a what is it? You have two things, right? You have the number of beats that exist out there multiplied by the number of rappers who have their infinite amount of interpretations of that beat to create their song. It makes thousands and thousands and thousands of songs and music, which to me is the best thing about hip hop that I really like. It's such a prolific genre. That said, there's something to be mentioned about being able to create from scratch. Like I love
yeah,
creating from scratch because it's all like the seed of the creation was really from you in a room with people talking about, how was your day? Oh, it was fine. Okay. And then you start, right? Um, I think they're all important and they're all, interesting ways of making music. And I'm really glad that you said that. That now, with Eddie Pesos, the quest for sound, that it'll come from within the city. Because I believe that Calgary, I'm going to sound like a broken record. I feel like I've said this to people off the podcast, but I feel like I'll tell it to you. But I feel like Calgary is like just untapped potential. Any
yeah,
place that doesn't have a music industry is untapped potential. But Calgary is very special because it's like Texas in the sense that, like, hey man, Beyonce came from Houston, and Beyonce is now she's the queen of R&B, all right? So, and she came from Texas, which isn't supposed to be where R&B comes from. It's supposed to be like Atlanta or it's supposed to be like LA or something, right?
yeah,
Or New Orleans, but she came from there. So that to me is the biggest piece of hope is that, and it's not just hope. It's like, it's a potential for prosperity in the city. Like,
Yeah.
imagine, like, there's only what, like 100 or maybe 1,000 of us in Calgary, but one day if it were like 10,000, suddenly like 10,000 is like 1% of the Calgary population, like 1%. It's got to be bigger than that, I hope. But if it was like 100,000, 10% of the population, that's a music industry. You know what I mean? And then if it ever gets to like 25%, gosh, like 250,000 active musicians or rappers or songwriters all in Calgary, I guarantee you, like, record labels will start moving out here. Hollywood will start moving out here. Because the truth is, I don't know if you feel this way, but um, LA and like New York is so expensive. I don't
Yeah.
think people want to stay there. I
Yeah.
mean, that people are moving out of there. Like, I love those places. They're always iconic to me. But reality is, like I don't know if I could even afford like a 1 bedroom studio out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll cost,
So
like, for sure. Like, it's like the dream is free, the hustle is sold separately, as always, right? And yeah, like, I think you're right. I agree with the untapped, Calgary is an untapped market. Like, I've been asked a question of like, have you thought of moving to Toronto? And the thing is, like, I've immersed myself. I haven't fully immersed myself in the Toronto music scene, but I've slowly touched into Toronto artists and Toronto platforms. And in all honesty, Toronto is amazing. It's a great city, but I think there's just as hungry people there than we have here. And the thing is, like, if you're from Calgary and you move to Toronto, and I'm not done playing that for anyone else by any means, shape, way, or form. But this is just my opinion that I think if I were to move to Toronto, no one will co-sign me because I'm from Calgary. Like, why couldn't I just make something for myself here and then connect with people in Toronto? I think they would respect that more. Well,
yes.
whereas there are people who have done that. There are people who have made success in Calgary before transitioning to Toronto, and I think that's the way to go before just immersing yourself in Toronto. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I've heard this from a friend who knows who used to work for Universal Canada, and I don't really use him to be like, hey, give me a record deal, because I personally know I'm not ready for a record deal yet. I know that
Mm-hmm.
or have a record deal, I want to have that discipline mentally and artistically, and I want to have that. I want my art to be in top tier form if ever I were to reach that level. But
Mm.
people from that those companies like record labels are wondering, okay, so who's in Calgary? What's up? So there's that curiosity already from them, and with the internet, it's not far fetched as it used to be 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. And or even just like a 15-second TikTok of an amazing singer and a
Mm-hmm.
Universal rep going and saying, "Oh wow, he's amazing" or "She's great," and then see where that goes. Um, and also, like, I think that there's so many new avenues in being successful in the music industry. Like, I think that it's like I've always thought of like the record deal as one way to make a great success, like, because you can get an advance if that's the deal, or you can get, a nice profit share, and they would push your music really, really far for you. That's one of the real advantages of a record deal. Um, I'm also a big believer that, like, if there are no record deals, if they never do come, that there's no reason that you would stop to keep going independent. I think that there are lots of outlets out there who just like what we do normally. We submit, and eventually, if one of them believe in us, it goes out there. And I think doing that at a stubborn level, I say stubborn because that's how I feel sometimes. Fans will still discover you, and that's
Mm-hmm.
really at the end of the day what we really want, right? Having the fans that care about you, because at the end, any representative, any industry representative can tell you what they want to say, and they can say you're the greatest.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the fans have to really feel the same way too. Um, but that's so cool that you feel that about Calgary. I've always thought about, because I moved to Vancouver and I have friends out in Toronto, and I've always thought, like, why doesn't it make sense for me to move out there? I've always felt that, like, I don't want to, and there was always that thought that, like, the way you were thinking, that this is something you can grow here. Now, I mean, like, it's not going to be easy because
Mhm.
we are part of that line of pioneering the Calgary music industry, and there are like moments, like, you know, what is it? I don't want to butcher the name. Uh, Dragonfly Empire. Yes,
Mhm.
thank you. Who have been around for a while, but now, like, if you look at the industry, it's more than just them. Um, there's lots of people out here now, and I think that that's really important. The quantity of people that are taking it seriously has to grow in Calgary. People
Yeah.
have to know that they can just decide one day, like, I'm serious about music and I want to pursue it, and then just
Yeah.
pursue it. I think that that's really important. And then if people ask you the same thing, like, should I pursue music? You just say, yeah. Why? What's stopping you? Is it like
100.
your ego or what is it? But yeah, I always felt that way. I feel like I wish Calgary would just like, look, if you're good at music, just get up there and show us what you got. I think that's so important. Otherwise, what's going to happen to us?
And I don't know. I think and I agree with all of that in all honesty, because like even with Dragonfly Empire, because I think with music, if you really want your art to look quality and sound quality, in all honesty, you have to spend money to make money, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And now you can't really rely on grants every now and then unless you're really like top notch and like every grant you submit you're approved. But then again, if you look at it realistically, grants only come every what, quarterly.
Yeah.
There's a grant for like say $2,000, $5,000. But
Mm-hmm.
being that we're in Calgary, I think there's also I don't really follow the news or business per se, but for a point in time, Calgary was essential of oil and gas, right? And
Yeah.
so there is employment here. And looking at OGs like Dragonfly Empire, like they were able to pursue or even refine their art because they had employment. And I think stability wise, you have, if you think you're good at something that you're doing, you have to also be smart. Okay, how can I push that? Say if it was this
Yeah.
like a hobby that you really wanted to push, say being an artist, how do you back that? You back that with currency. And I think that's one relevance that we have in our city. And people just need to have that discipline of investment. And I learned this by the people I currently surround myself with now, that if you don't invest in yourself, how can you expect a return? Like
Yeah.
it's crazy, right? And I get questions every now and then, and this is no disrespect to anyone. This is just like it's easier said, like it's always hard for me to explain this to the person that asks me the question, how do you get this publication, how did you get featured here, how did you get featured there, how did you get that press? And it's very hard for me to explain it because some of them don't really get that mindset yet, but they will. And I think that change is slowly coming, that hey, I invested in studio time, like I understand that whoever was engineering my sound is a human being too, that I can negotiate with. If I can't pay full price, I can talk to him and see what's reasonable for him. But I will not allow someone to do work for me for free, because
Mm-hmm.
that person, I would want my time to be compensated. Time is currency you can never ever gain back, and I think
Yeah.
people understand that first. And besides that, besides just recording, or besides hiring a graphic artist, a videographer, a photographer, how do you expound that? You don't really
Mm-hmm.
need a manager per se right away. I think the most successful managers start out as friends first. You can't just
Mm-hmm.
go on Kijiji or Indeed and manager for hire.
Yeah.
Right? You can't.
Anyone would come up to that, right? It's like, I'll be your
Yeah,
manager. Sure.
and it's different because a manager has to help you grow your brand. That's why I
Mm.
didn't really take the manager route first. Like there were managers that I would love to have had and I would still love to have, but they're busy expanding their career right now. And I
Mm-hmm.
totally respect that. That's respectable. But there's also other avenues, like there's a publicist, right? And
Yes.
that's one person who I have in my team right now, but I don't let that publicist work for free.
Mm-hmm.
I ask them what their rate is and I pay them. And in turn, not just because I paid someone, that I can treat them for whatever way I want. I
Mm-hmm.
think a business is a relationship, an
Yeah.
artistic, so to speak, that you have to at least be decent enough to those people to really believe in you and help you expand. And I think there's a lot of levels to it that I just can't say to someone, oh, I hired a publicist, go hire a publicist too. But
Mm-hmm. It's really
Who's
an
most,
investment. Yes, you're
yeah,
absolutely right. I
it's a,
I think that like this idea of like you know um, you know going pro bono has to eventually go. Otherwise, there's no music industry. You know, there's no money in being an engineer. There's no money in being a publicist. There's no money in being a producer. Um, I love that you said that you're investing in yourself because people forget that if they're taking this seriously, that it comes with investment, and you don't get paid by not spending money. But it's not to say that you're not spending money wisely. You have to put that money aside. Are you going to get that? Are you going to get that new MacBook, or are you going to stick with your old one and use that money for something else more important, right? And the same thing with the pleasures that you can get with having extra money. I think that it's very wise to use that money properly. And coming from a city where it's like all about splurging money from oil and gas, that's such a shift in mindset, which I think is probably what our city needs: a shift in mindset. You got to
yeah,
invest in in your art form. If you're serious about your art, if you work a day job and you want to make this into a real thing, invest in your art form. That comes hand in hand.
yeah.
Which
That's why I have a
Oh,
lot of
sorry, go
respect.
ahead.
No, no, sorry about that. That's why I just wanted to add to what you said that like that was exactly what I wanted to caption with Dragonfly Empire in the beginning. I think they were very smart in they're smart people outside music and both inside music that even still up to date. Because I remember even before I started rapping, I researched about the Calgary urban art scene, and Dragonfly Empire was always one of the top names that always came out. And I think that's why up till today they're still relevant and they're still really a big they're a cornerstone in the Calgary music and urban art scene is because they're smart people outside of music and they know how to invest it. Like they're one of the
Hmm.
only artists who I know who was able to sell or have a distribution deal of plaques, vinyls in Europe. And
Mm.
I think that's they're very smart people, and I hope that advancement pays forward with the next upcoming artists, and yeah, I really admire them for that.
I really think so, based on the way that you're speaking about them and the way that your mindset is. I think that that's the case. Um, I want to talk about identity because I'm Filipino, and it's kind of nice to be able to talk from one Filipino man to another Filipino man, which is really cool. Um, I've noticed your voice of the pride of the Philippines, and having pride in your heritage, and being Pinoy, and being mentioned in several media outlets who are also for Filipinos. You being one of them. Um, just tell me a little bit about what that is to you, because it is nice for media to tell that story on your behalf. But I'm curious about that to you. Like, what does it mean to be a Filipino to you? Um, so yeah, please.
Yeah, definitely, man. Like I was asked this yesterday on CBC. I was asked like, what do you think of every time you get featured somewhere? It's like Filipino rapper, Filipino rapper. Um, I'm proud of the label, like when quote unquote label Filipino there because it identifies me where I really came from, my roots. Because in all honesty, rap and hip hop, it's also gives me a sense of authenticity that I'm not just biting someone else's culture, that I'm a diaspora who is connected to that culture in a certain shape, way, or form. Being Filipino and I've always loved social studies and I've always loved Philippine history. We have the same patterns of like every older tribe had gongs, drums around it. So being that authenticity of where you are, which is hip hop culture per se, came from the black culture, and
Hmm.
Filipinos are a diaspora.
Hmm.
Whereas the mix of that culture, not entirely, but we are connected. And I just
Hmm.
want to label it as like, hey, I'm a in a perfect world where labels and whatever didn't exist, we'd all be known as singers, dancers, rappers. But nowadays, I think you have to really show who you are until people
Hmm.
don't disregard that anymore.
Yeah.
Especially and yeah, if I was, I just think it's a value that I also learned growing up, patriotism. Be it, if I were born Japanese, or if I were born, say from Spain, I would say Spanish rapper or Japanese rapper. But I think it's always good to identify who you are, especially nowadays where cliche. It's like not also insulting anyone, but sometimes you get a question, oh, what kind of Asian are you? So I'd rather just have that question answered right away. Plus, it's somewhere I grew up around. Like even the success of Manny Pacquiao, no one really knew about Manny Pacquiao until like every time Bruce Buffer announced him, the pride of the Philippines, Manny Pacquiao. It gives people a sense of hope, and that's what I want, because I've seen poverty back home. I've seen how life is back home, and I'm just blessed that I have this life here right now. And if I can do it, I just want to have someone who listens to me also have that sense of hope that he or she may not be a rapper, or they may not be a rapper, but in whatever they're pursuing, if they really find the discipline and really work on it with themselves along with what their passion is, they maybe can achieve some sort of peace and happiness with it. That's all I wanted with that.
Yeah, I do like that self-discipline and inner passion. It makes me wonder because, I've had this discussion with my family and with my brothers, because one time I went back to the Philippines in 2013.
Yeah.
I do remember in like the 90s when I was in the Philippines in Manila, my grandmother pulling me around, that I would smell like, diesel smoke, and I would, we would cross over some squatters, and, you'd, see some yuckiness here and there. And it's just the reality of the Philippines.
Yeah.
But going back in 2013, you're like, being who I am now, this Canadian individual in the Philippines, you're like, wow, this is wrong. Because that's like the Western lens, right? Wow, this is wrong. But if you go on the flip side, being a Filipino and the perspective, some people think that that's just normal over there, which to me is strange, because, I guess poverty is like it's normal. It's normalized out there. One time I was talking to my cousin. She lives here now, by the way. But when we were at Valenzuela, which is like a pretty poor project in the Philippines, we were just sitting outside, chilling in front of her door, and her house is very small. I was asking her, how did this happen? Like, I asked that big question, like, how is the Philippines so poor? And she said, well, it's the government. And she would tell me, what, and this is all in Tagalog, right? She's telling me in Tagalog. And I'm like, still trying to decipher, but I can. I can do it. She was saying basically in Tagalog that, like, the government will say, we have a 10-year plan for this highway. And 10 years pass, and that highway is not finished. And then their excuse will be complications in the project management, some kind of excuse. And then when she said that, I was like, oh gosh, it's a corrupt government. So it's like, it's the people in power pressing down. And I think that was around a time, that was right before Duterte came into power. And now, from what I understand, with Duterte in power, it's like extrajudicial killings and this kind of, do I want to say the word radical? It is a little bit radical, isn't it? But like, it's just like, it's so radical now, with someone saying something like, extrajudicial killing, and being very strict, and being very, very sort of, I guess, extreme. What do you think about that?
In all honesty, man, like I've tried to get into it, but I don't really, because I remember growing up, the news always had like something. There's always something terrible happening on the news, except for when the entertainment section comes in, and that's I think the breath of fresh air. Then you go back again to someone got killed, or unfortunately someone's grandfather raped whoever's daughter. And I never really liked hearing it. That's why I don't think I'm a big fan of even watching the news. I'm aware of it. It's not that I don't care. I'm aware of it, and in most cases I'm silent about it. Like, I don't really post on social media about it. I have my views about it, but I just feel that this has gone on for centuries, even before President Duterte, like even before the administration. Like, I may not really be exposed to the severity of it, just because I just choose to tune myself out from the news nowadays, just for my mental as well. But it's, because my parents are still back home in the Philippines, and I worry about them every now and then. But worrying won't get you anywhere. You just, like I said, yeah, I'm really practicing to just be present. Like worrying always makes me think about the future, something that hasn't happened yet. We're always on. If we could know whatever we want, we human beings would we would. But going back to that topic, it's like it's been centuries. Even from studying Philippine history, it's been centuries of backstabbing, but it also goes back to colonial mentality. Where if you watch even now books that have been put into film, Filipinos would go against each other because someone would pay them in US dollars, and that's been in our history. Yeah, like even the first presidency, going back to Emilio Aguinaldo and Andres Bonifacio, like it's always been a mystery, but people always have theories that, oh yeah, he did it. The president asked this guy to be killed because he was supposed to oust that president. Like in history, and it's been because we're a war-torn country. Like I think if you approach it from a way where it's like this, our country has never had the chance to heal. It's never had the chance to heal. It was touched by colonizers from Spain, and since then it's been passed from one colonizer to another. And being beings, our mind is a sponge. We're a product of our environment. So I think it's so easy to blame, and I'm not condoning the violence that's happening now and back home today. It's very sad and disheartening. But in reality, I cannot do anything about it. As much as I wish I could, I really couldn't. But if I understand it from a way that this has been something that has happened from way back, that sadly, it's an ego trip. Everyone who's in power, like back then, but because we never really knew the sense of power, because back then in ancient Filipino history, our leaders were called datus.
Yep.
The chieftains. We didn't really know any other hierarchy besides that the datu was like the father, the shepherd of the tribe. It was introduced to us. And I think it's just learned and evolved. And unfortunately, with its evolution, the evolution was a bloody one. The evolution caused multiple revolutions as well. And I think that instead of, I'm not really sure how to answer this, but with regard to like protesting, I'm never against it. I think everyone should fight for what they believe in, either stand for something or fall for anything, right? But I think if you are to stand for something and really want to go behind it, that you have to approach strategically.
It needs legs.
Yeah, it's always chess, not checkers. Like always have to strategize your moves, that if you really want to make a greater change, then be the change within yourself first. Cliche as it may, but put yourself in a position where you can actually make some change. It may not change the country, but say that recently my sister was able to let a young kid in the Philippines go to college because she was donating some $40-50 a month to this institution. And that institution was able to buy an iPad, pay tuition fee. I don't know the whole schematics of things, but that changed one person's life, and that kid one day can pay that forward. That I think it's really sad what's happening back home, and I'm just really grateful and blessed that I'm not there. And my heart really goes out to the people who are experiencing it. But when it comes to change, or when it comes to hoping to change that, I think you have to put yourself in a greater position first, and then impactful change. Or if you want to make change now, do it by little steps on how you can change someone else's life, specifically the children there. It's always been said from our younger years that the children are the future. And that may be because biologically they have more time on their body clock than us. So why not invest in someone there who can pay that forward? That's how I think of it.
I love that. Education is, I think you're right. It's very, with any society that puts education in the forefront succeeds. I mean, that's why America and that's why the UK and Canada are on the top, because, education is on the forefront, and, that drives the economy up because you come up with great ideas, and those great ideas push the world forward. Right. And, you're right. I think that, things like what your sister's doing, investing in the future of somebody through education is a wonderful step. It's like you said, it's what you can do now. I'm of a person who believes that there is hope in the Philippines. I always say that, Philippines could be like next Japan. Japan came up with a microchip. Philippines might come up with something like I
Yeah.
don't know, something else. Who knows, right? It all starts with just, great ideas and like a place or space to innovate and to make it happen. But I always dreamed that like one day the Philippines could be, and I hate the term first world, third world and all that stuff, but the one day Philippines could be prosperous because I mean, if it were a prosperous country, honestly, I don't think my family would have moved out. I think we would probably still be there. You probably still there too.
Oh yeah.
Um, but yeah, I love the Philippines. I always wish that, poverty is not a thing out there. Uh, I want to talk about music for a little bit because we went over back to the
Yeah.
homeland in our
Yeah.
minds. I always ask this question because sometimes I forget to ask it to my guests, and I remember to ask it finally with you, and it's to do with music. What is music to you?
Music to me, I think music is therapy because, and music is life in general.
Mm.
Um, even even if someone were say deaf, there's vibrations,
Mhm.
and for those who are blessed with all the senses, I think that's why we enjoy certain artists because it reminds you of a soundtrack that you're going through in your life. You always have a song for when you're happy. You always have your favorite party jam. You always have your favorite drinking, smoking jam, or your favorite, when just for those days that are dark type jam.
Mhm.
And music is a mix of melodies, harmonies, and vibrations to embody someone's life. And to be able to create that is very special. That's why that's one thing to enjoy about being an artist.
Wow, that's very powerful. Um, for me, music has saved me on multiple occasions. So therapy, it is for sure. When you're going home after a bad day, I could always throw on Coldplay and I'll be happy. Um, but like on multiple occasions, music has been an alternative to me. Where if I had gone another route, my life would have been tremendously different.
Yeah.
And not going into too much detail, but basically like I had friends who were involved with the wrong people, and I had that or band and choir practice, and I chose band and choir practice. So in that sense, I can always look to music as something that saved me from an alternative, because I mean I don't know where my friends are now or those friends are now. Um, but I love what you said, that that we transmit that energy, um, these vibrations to the people, because we're like, I always see that we're kind of like we're kind of like agents of the universe, in a sense that we can decipher those patterns. Like
Yeah.
music is a phenomenon of patterns, physical patterns that somehow psychologically, like they go in your brain, and then it becomes something else, from patterns in the physical air suddenly going into your brain and meaning something very deep, is like, that's still a phenomenon that needs to be, I think, explored by science. And musicians do it like it's nothing, like it's a
Yeah.
gift. It's like that we could do that.
Yeah.
um that's music, man. Thank you very much for that.
No.
uh what time is it? We've reached the hour. So thank you very much for stepping on here, Eddie. What I'd like to do with my guests is, I like to give them this opportunity to just say what they want to say. If you want to promote something, if you want to spread a message, you could take this time just to say whatever you'd like.
Yeah, no, thank you, man. Well, first off, I want to thank you for the opportunity and the conversation. Like I said, I used to be very isolated, and I used to not really have any sense of commitment, especially when it comes to social interactions. So as speaking, but I think it's important, right? It's part of networking. It's a part of the discipline that I want to achieve right now, and I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me. And yeah, the questions were really great. We were able to tap in a bit for back home and a bit as different perspectives, or different, but not really so different perspectives. I like to say now, after talking to you on music and both as Filipino artists in North America. And yeah, I'm planning to release new music still at the end of this or somewhere along the line this year. I don't want to set a timeline. Whenever it comes under Eddie Pesos, I hopefully. But to whoever's listening to this podcast, be it you're a musician or an artist, all I can say is invest in yourself, really, and grow and build with people. Building not in the sense that you just pay someone financially, but actually trying to establish a relationship and mutual respect for that creator. or that person who would help you in your endeavor as an artist. For Calgary artists, I haven't really said this much in previous like conversations or interviews or platforms, but I'm in no spokesperson for them in any way, shape, or form. I'm just a musical member. But Alberta Music, for artists who are listening here, I think it's a really great investment. They've helped me out so much before and during the pandemic with regard to learning and opportunities. So I really encourage people and artists to look into that and invest into that. And just, you don't really have to copy someone else's route or someone else's team. Just know that whatever you need in your journey as an artist or as a creator, as a businessman, you may already have your team within your circle. You just don't know who they are yet. So just try to figure that out in a disciplined and, like I said, responsible way. Be responsible in taking care of that person who will one day help you achieve what you need. And that's community. That's building for me. And thank you, man.
Thank you very much, Eddie. You take care now.